Angela Merkel wins a fourth term as German Chancellor, but her victory is clouded by the far-right AfD. In Japan, Shinzo Abe calls a snap election. And the Transport Department to review guidelines on bus drivers' working hours.
Hello and welcome to TVB News. German Chancellor Angela Merkel faces the complex task of finding partners in a potentially fragile coalition after her centre-right alliance underperformed in Sunday's election. One of the biggest shocks of the night was the strength of the Alternative for Germany. Its stellar performance means for the first time a far-right party is in the German parliament in more than half a century.
In some ways, it was politics as usual in Germany. Predictably, Angela Merkel won another term as Chancellor as her Christian Democrat and Christian Social Union alliance won the largest share of votes in Germany's general election. But in other ways, German politics was turned on its head as the far-right AfD won the third largest share of votes, a result that exceeded everyone's expectations. Merkel might be starting a fourth term as Chancellor, but her CDU-CSU bloc suffered its worst result in almost 70 years, taking around 33% of the ballots. The socialist left-of-centre SPD also had a poor night, grabbing only around 20.5% of the vote, its worst result since 1949. The SPD says it will not re-enter into a coalition with Merkel and will instead go into opposition after its bruising loss. Instead, the night belonged to the Alternative for Germany, or AfD. Building on growing hostility to immigration, especially Merkel's decision to accept 1 million refugees in 2015, the AfD won 12.6% of the vote to grab a decisive share of seats in the Bundestag. It's the first time a far-right party will enter the German parliament in more than 50 years. The reaction to the rise of the AfD was one of disbelief and outrage. There were protests as soon as it became clear the AfD was on course for its stunning result. Many protesters said the AfD's rise was an eerie reminder of Germany's dark past and the terrible direction the country took under the Nazis.
Die AfD 13.
But there was elation amongst AfD supporters. Many have strongly disagreed with Merkel's tolerant policy towards immigrants and refugees in recent years, claiming the volume of migrants threatens job security and dilutes German culture. Still, Merkel's party remains the biggest parliamentary bloc, and Europe's most powerful leader says her Conservatives will set about building the next government. She was sure a coalition would be agreed by Christmas. But there's no doubt last night's result is a blow to Merkel, and a political outcome which has weakened her hand.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has announced he'll dissolve the lower house of parliament and call a snap election for next month. Abe said today he will dissolve the more powerful house in Japan's two-chamber parliament on Thursday. The election will be held October the 22nd. Also today, Tokyo's popular governor announced she's launching a new political party to challenge Abe's ruling party. Yuriko Koike said she plans to send candidates to vie for some of the 475 seats in the lower house. Koike's party won a landslide victory in the city assembly election in July, dealing a major blow to Abe's scandal-plagued Liberal Democratic Party. Several parliamentarians have announced their intention to join her party.
Polls have opened in parts of Iraq as the country's Kurdish population cast ballots on whether to support independence from Baghdad in a non-binding vote. But the referendum is being held despite mounting regional opposition to the move over fears it could destabilize the region. James Aiken reports.
Millions are expected to vote across 3 provinces that make up the Kurdish Autonomous Region and in disputed and oil-rich territories claimed by both Baghdad and the Kurds. We are all very happy, says this voter, and we hope that we can achieve independence. This is our right, the right of self-determination for the Kurdish people, says this woman. Iraqi Kurds have dreamed of independence since the map of the Middle East was redrawn after World War I. The Kurds form a sizable minority in Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. But the vote is being carried out despite intense international pressure. In a televised address, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said the referendum is unconstitutional and is a danger to the region. Baghdad demanded yesterday that all airports and border crossings in the Kurdish regions be handed back to federal government control. Turkey insists the results of the referendum will be null and void and has called on the international community not to recognize the vote either. On Saturday, Turkey's parliament met to extend the mandate, allowing Turkey's military to send troops over its border if developments in Iraq and Syria are perceived as a national security threat. On Saturday, Iran's military began exercises in its northwestern Kurdish region. Iran also strongly opposes the vote, saying Kurdish leaders are playing with fire. Kurds also make up the third largest ethnic group in Iran. The United States also opposes any moves towards independence, fearing it could lead to the breakup of Iraq and bring even more instability to the volatile Middle East. The vote is non-binding and is not expected to result in a formal declaration of independence, but it is meant to give the Kurdish leadership more leverage in negotiations with Baghdad and neighboring states. James Aiken, TVB News.
Staying in the region, and for the first time, Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard has put on public display the country's sophisticated Russian-made S-300 air defense system. The event near the capital's parliament building exhibited different missile systems, including ballistic missiles, solid fuel surface-to-surface missiles, and liquid fuel missiles. The show is part of the annual Defense Week, marking the 37th anniversary of the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. US President Donald Trump signed a bill last month imposing mandatory penalties on those involved in Iran's controversial ballistic missile program and anyone who does business with them.
Thousands rallied in Barcelona on Sunday in support of a disputed referendum on the independence of Catalonia from Spain. Many held Catalan flags and signs expressing support for the October the 1st independence vote that Madrid has called illegal and has vowed to halt. Spain's constitutional court suspended the law calling for the referendum, and police have cracked down on preparations for the vote. Separatists have pressed ahead anyway and vowed to declare independence if they win the referendum. Polls show the 7.5 million residents of Catalonia are roughly split on breaking with the rest of Spain.
Closer to home now, and on his first day at work as head of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office,张曉stressed the central government's policy on Hong Kong has never changed. He added Beijing continues to have zero tolerance for calls on Hong Kong independence. Winnie Wong reports.
Today was the first time Zhang Xiaoming spoke to the press as director of Beijing's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. Zhang, who is widely known for his hard stance against Beijing critics, said he is aware of criticism towards him and his latest promotion. He cited an old Chinese saying, "You're responsible for your own decisions, and it is up to others whether they wish to praise or criticize you. I believe I've been doing the right thing and has always been in line with the central government's stance towards Hong Kong," he said. Zhang added that people should not see mere personnel changes within the government as signs that Beijing is changing its policies towards the SAR. "As far as I know, it's never changed," he said. On the topic of Hong Kong independence, Zhang said it is a question of right and wrong. He stressed once again that calling for Hong Kong independence is against the basic law and existing laws in the SAR, and it constitutes secession. He said anything relating to it brings nothing but harm to the SAR. Here in Hong Kong, Zhang's successor Wang Zhimin also met the press for the first time and even greeted reporters in Cantonese. He described Hong Kong as his second home. Wang had worked in the local liaison office before he was named head of Macau's liaison office in 2016. He said he will work to support the SAR government and promote exchanges between the mainland and Hong Kong. Asked about what he will concentrate on, Wang said his goals are in line with his predecessor. Winna Wang, TVB News.
3 people remain in serious condition after Friday's fatal bus crash in Sham Shui Po. This comes as the bus company confirmed today that the driver involved had asked to work overtime. But as Caleb Leung reports, there are growing calls to reduce working hours for safety's sake.
Police officers and government lab technicians returned to the crash site this afternoon to gather evidence. A section of Chengsha Wan Road near Yanchao Street was closed off during their investigation. The incident happened last Friday when a city bus double-decker crashed into a building, causing 3 deaths and more than 30 injuries. City bus officials met today with the families of those killed in the crash and gave a consolation payment to them. But the family slammed city bus for its poor management, allowing drivers to be physically overworked. They also believe the accident was unacceptable and avoidable and demanded an explanation and justice. As for the 44-year-old bus driver involved in the crash, City Bus confirmed that he wanted to work extra hours. He had been working shifts longer than 13 hours over several days before the accident. City Bus says most of its drivers work 10-hour shifts. According to the Transport Department's guidelines, bus drivers can't work any more than 14 hours per shift. This includes a maximum 11 hours of driving. Currently, the base salary for a new driver is $12,500 per month. However, the pay could be bumped up to $19,000 with 2 hours of overtime work per shift and other subsidies. A city bus employees union noted that some bus drivers demand to work extra hours for additional income. The union's head Hui Han Kit noted that some drivers choose to work extra hours as they are the breadwinners and need the extra money. Hui reiterated the union's demand to reduce working hours per shift. He also noted the need to raise drivers' wages, otherwise a reduction in working hours would only translate into wage cuts. Meanwhile, Acting Chief Executive Matthew Cheung believes it's time to review and adjust the working hours of drivers so as to ensure they have enough rest time. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
And still ahead on the news tonight, more NFL player protests in response to Donald Trump's comments about the league. Customs officers remind the public about the safety of festive toys ahead of the Mid-Autumn Festival. And the Aurora Borealis, as seen from space. And a warm welcome back to TVB News. US President Donald Trump insists his objections to NFL players kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality has nothing to do with race, but their respect for their country. His latest comments did nothing to calm nerves, especially after he urged team owners to fire those players. Jeff Tang reports.
8 months into his presidency, it seems Donald Trump is carving out a niche for himself when it comes to uniting opposing sides against him. The US president's latest tirade triggered an unusual amount of solidarity between the National Football League and its players, which are often at odds. Trump had inflamed the sports world last Friday by calling on NFL owners to fire the players who refused to stand or conduct other acts of defiance during the national anthem to protest police brutality against black people. Following those comments, more than 200 NFL players either sat, knelt or raised their fists in defiance while the Star-Spangled Banner was played before their Sunday games. The issue reverberated across the Atlantic, where about 24 NFL players took a knee during the playing of the US anthem at Wembley Stadium. But Trump stood by his comments and repeated that owners in America's #1 sport should do something about the protests.
We have great people representing our country, especially our soldiers, our first responders, and they should be treated with respect. And when you get on your knee and you don't respect the American flag or the anthem, that's not being treated with respect. So I certainly think the owners should do something about it.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin went on national television to defend his boss.
I think what the president is saying is that the owner should have a rule that players should have to stand in respect for the national anthem. This isn't about Democrats, it's not about Republicans, it's not about race, it's not about free speech. They can do free speech on their own time. That this is about respect for the military and the first responders and the country.
The growing row also spread to America's other major sports, including Major League Baseball and the National Basketball Association. Last Friday, Golden State Warriors star Stephen Curry said he didn't want to go to the White House for the traditional visit by championship clubs to meet with the president. The next morning, Trump tweeted that Curry was no longer invited to the White House. Then Cleveland Cavaliers superstar LeBron James weighed in and called the president a bum in one of the most shared tweets ever. The Warriors defended Curry and hinted that they weren't going to the White House anyway. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
Staying in the United States, and a masked gunman shot seven people, killing one of them at a church in the U.S. state of Tennessee yesterday. While the gunman was being tackled by a church member, he shot himself and was wounded in the chest. Police are now holding an injured suspect who was identified as 25-year-old Emmanuel Kidiga Sampson. In yesterday's incident, the gunman shot and killed a woman in the parking lot of a Nashville church before he entered the building and opened fire again, wounding 6 worshippers. As the church usher grappled with the assailant, he was struck in the head with the gunman's weapon. In the struggle, the attacker shot himself. It's not clear if it was on purpose. The injured usher then retrieved a gun from his car, returned to the church, and held the suspect at bay until police arrived. Metropolitan Nashville Police hailed the 22-year-old usher as an exceptionally brave individual.
Back locally, a British woman known as QT, who spent years in court fighting for dependent visa rights for her female partner, has finally won her case. The Court of Appeal today ruled that her partner, known as SS, would now receive the same spousal benefits that heterosexual couples are entitled to. The two women had entered a civil partnership in the UK and moved to Hong Kong in 2011 when QT took up a job. She filed a judicial review in 2015 challenging the Immigration Department's rejection of a dependent visa. But that was rejected by the High Court last year on the grounds that marriage in Hong Kong law is defined as that of between a man and a woman. Today's ruling was unanimous among the Court of Appeal's 3 judges and said that the Immigration Department exacted indirect discrimination against QT based on her sexuality.
Customs officers today reminded the public about the safety of festive toys and lanterns ahead of the Mid-Autumn Festival. Officers were in Sham Shui Po, Mong Kok and Wan Chai, handing out safety leaflets following spot checks on retailers. Kenny Chan, head of the department's Consumer Protection Bureau, told reporters that officers had found 10 lantern models and 2 light-emitting toy models that didn't have proper manufacturer ID markings. He added that 6 retailers were ordered to store 157 lanterns and 21 light-emitting toys which had breached safety laws. Anyone found breaking the law can be fined $100,000 and sentenced to a year in jail upon first conviction.
Bank of China Hong Kong has issued new banknotes to celebrate its 100 years in Hong Kong. The bank will issue 5 million of these $100 bills. They feature the bank's headquarters on one side, with other iconic landmarks like the Great Wall of China in the background. Victoria Harbour is featured on the other side of the note. The public can apply to buy the commemorative banknotes from next Thursday until October the 18th. Applicants must have a Hong Kong ID card and be aged 18 years or above.